In a world where players routinely suffer concussions and get their bell rung, just how much is too much where trauma to one's brain is concerned?
Playing sports can take an enormous toll on your body, but what about your mind?
Tonight, the full impact of contact sports.
Tonight, athletes and injuries you can't see.
Brain trauma that can easily go undetected.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. Tonight, we're going to discuss really everything that a parent and a coach needs to know about concussions. I want to give you all tonight an appreciation for what repetitive brain trauma means to athletes and how to keep athletes playing safe.
He was a Harvard-educated biotech consultant, researching the link between serious brain problems like memory loss, dementia, and depression, and repeated concussions, having suffered 6 concussions of his own. They began at Harvard, where he played football. And then, after graduation, you took your substantial education and became a
professional wrestler. Of course.
Way to the ring, weighing in at 260 pounds, Christopher Nowinski. What is he doing?
Head injuries forced Nowinski to retire with what doctors called post-concussion syndrome. That's when he began scouring all the science he could find on the long-term effects of concussions. And what he found was frightening.
I said, how can this be in the medical literature? And yet I've been playing football and wrestling for 11 years, and no one told me any of this. And then that's when I started just uncovering all these other guys with the same issues that all had no idea what was going on. And that's when I started realizing just how big the problem was.
Now that he knows concussions are to blame, he's passionate about getting the word out. He wrote a book called Head Games about the dangers of concussions. And he joined Dr. Cantu to found the Sports Legacy Institute.
Our group here at BU School of Medicine started around 2 years ago in 2008. And since that time, we've been doing a variety of research studies trying to understand the long-term consequences of repetitive head trauma in sports.
This building is the brain bank at the VA hospital. These jars, every one of them, is holding a brain. 12 of them belong to a special group of people. Men who spent much of their lives banging heads. Men who played football.
I feel sort of like an explorer or an investigator. I look at brain, but I'm trying to solve mysteries.
Dr. Cantu and his colleagues found that former NFL players who had at least 3 concussions were 3 times more likely to be clinically depressed and 5 times more likely to have pre-Alzheimer's.
A new study shows former NFL players have a much higher rate of Alzheimer's and dementia than the general population.
One of the most important things that we've come up with this center is studying the brains of retired professional football players and seeing in nearly all of them this very devastating neurodegenerative disease, CTE.
Chronic traumatic encephalopathy, or CTE, is a progressive brain disease that is caused by repetitive blows to the head.
So essentially, a protein in your brain becomes toxic to the cell, and cells start dying at some point while you're an athlete. And usually by your 40s, you're showing symptoms like memory problems, depression, personality change.
Those symptoms get worse and worse, and eventually the person will develop a full-blown dementia.
They say dead men tell no tales, but that's not really true, because what they found inside these brains told a story that rippled from this tiny lab all the way to the highest levels of the NFL.
A normal brain, that is an individual that does not have this injury or does not have any other condition, you shouldn't see any of this dark brown pigment. It would be completely white. None of this brown pigment would show up.
But you can tell that it was caused by trauma.
This pattern of injury is only seen in trauma. And you just don't see anything like this, what we see in these athletes.
A large segment of society thinks that concussions are innocuous and everybody recovers from them, and life is going to be merry ever after.
Not true.
Not true at all.
And one day in 2008, she read about the death of former Vikings linebacker Wally Hilgenberg.
My daughter answers the phone, and it's Chris Nowinski calling from Boston, asking if they could possibly have Wally's brain.
What Dr. McKee found in Hilgenberg's brain was what she had seen before in NFL players, toxic proteins. But what she had never seen before was this. Toxic proteins had seeped into his spinal cord and poisoned his nervous system. Their head injuries, Dr. McKee was now convinced, had caused their ALS. This is the first ever known cause of ALS.
Yes, you could say that.
That's a major breakthrough.
Yeah.
This is a former NFL player. It's the first case we did at Boston University. John Grimsley was diagnosed with at least 3 concussions in college, 8 concussions in the NFL. A 65-year-old person from the Framingham Heart Study with an unknown trauma history has no tau. A boxer who's actually with dementia, you see enormous cell death. With Grimsley at 45, you see that he had nearly as much cell death as the boxer at 73. Entire parts of his brain were mostly dead.
Concussions and other head injuries must be taken seriously.
The professional sports organizations have come around, specifically the NFL. They've luckily become kind of a leader on this.
The changes that have gone on at the NFL have been extraordinary. They've made concussion and concussion awareness a public health topic.
You have to realize I have friends who are in their 30s who are taking Alzheimer's medicine because they've had issues with concussion.
Only now we're starting to see the effects of head trauma on our previous generations, the long-term effects.
It's very exciting to see the professional sports change and really the culture change that's come with it.
The NFL has taken steps to make the game safer.
The changes have not slowed Chris Nowinski. He's still collecting brains from dead NFL players, and he's now hitting up the living players too. More than 60 of them have pledged to donate their brains to Nowinski after they die.
Some of the guys are doing it, honestly, to protect their own sons, because they have sons playing football and they recognize this is a problem, and if they can be part of the solution, they want to do it. We're not telling people to run away from the field screaming. What we're saying is understand that there are risks to what you do. You can mitigate those risks by taking proper precautions.
We're trying to tell coaches to scale back hitting by half now, today, stopping kids from hitting so much in practice. Become a better coach by getting them to be better football players without whacking their head. What's now law in Massachusetts is education. Every coach is educated. No kids going back into the same game when they're suspected of having a concussion. And I think that's going to go a long way towards making the game safer.
What I hope will happen is twofold. First, we prevent sports from actually destroying kids' lives by finding ways to play the games safely for the brain. And on the second side, we really hope to find ways to treat and cure CTE in people who've already been affected. To make it personal, I hope this is the group of researchers that finds a cure for this disease while I can still use it. You know, I figure if the average onset of symptoms for CTE is 43, I've got about 12 more years before I may need something, before I've lost so much tissue that there's really no turning back.